issues in the United States that are highly debated. One of the main topics that comes to mind is the debate concerning abortion. The stages of pregnancy and the line of vitality are important to understanding the debate surrounding abortion. There are different stages of pregnancy. The labeling of the pregnancy changes based on the stage being addressed. The stages are the germinal stage, the embryonic stage, and the fetal stage. The germinal stage happens when the egg and the sperm cells meet to form a zygote, which then begins to undergo cell division until it becomes a blastocyst that implants in the uterine lining. The embryonic stage starts about the 3rd week of pregnancy and lasts until the end of the 8th week. This is when the blastocyst becomes an embryo. During this stage, the embryo begins to develop some structures and the beginning of organs. The fetal stage starts at week 9 and lasts until the end of pregnancy. This stage is when the embryo becomes a fetus, when it develops its sex, the organs and body systems mature, and things like hair and fingernails begin to grow. The line of viability in regards to pregnancy is defined as one of two things. In the first, viability addresses whether a pregnancy is expected to continue developing normally. In early pregnancy, a normally developing pregnancy would be deemed viable, whereas early pregnancy loss or miscarriage would not. In the second, viability addresses whether a fetus might survive outside of the uterus. The line of viability is generally the boundary set by legislation concerning abortion, and is usually set at or around the 20th week of pregnancy, which is the earliest that a fetus has a chance to survive outside of the womb. Legislation concerning abortion was decentralized and given to states to control during the summer of 2022. As of right now, abortion is protected by law in 21 states and the District of Columbia, and is at risk of being severely limited or prohibited in 26 states and 3 territories. Abortion legislation affects women from their early teens to around the age of 55 in the United States, so the accessibility of abortions matters. It is often said that the use of the line of viability needs to change. Many argue that the line of viability is not the metric we should use to determine whether a medical abortion should occur. Human life is often cited as starting at conception, with the Christian Bible saying, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you," in reference to their God knowing babies even before they are created in the womb, and asserting that they have lives that are decided already. If a fetus is known before they are even born, then it is morally wrong to act against them. Human life is sacred, and protecting it is a must. The best way to protect human lives is to ban abortion. Abortion can affect more than just the women who are seeking them. Some say that the line of viability is too case-specific to be an accurate measure of the morality of a doctor to give a woman an abortion. The line of viability can put too much strain on states by discounting and dysregulating states' interests, and the undue burden standard has all of the problems that we've emphasized. It is often said that the undue burden standard, which the Supreme Court uses to determine if a law is placing a substantial obstacle that prevents someone from exercising a fundamental right, was too open to interpretation for the standard to actually be a standard, which is one of the reasons that the line of viability was overturned 30 years after being set. The line of viability can be a hindrance to states because it sets a hard precedent that is not necessarily for the welfare of the pregnant woman or the embryo in her womb. The line of viability is not helpful for states because it can limit the ability of a state to protect the welfare of human life. Human life is sacred. "You shall not murder" is one of the prime commandments of the Christian God, thus making abortion wrong on a moral level. A common way of thinking about abortion has it that abortion is murder and murder is morally wrong. Then, the line of viability is not a good way to determine the morality of abortion. This is because murder, depending on the person you ask, applies only to living things. This is incredibly subjective. It changes every time a different person is asked, and therefore cannot be a precedent that can be smoothly upheld in court. To ban abortion is to protect human lives. The welfare of women is greatly impacted by access to abortion. There have been studies on the effects of limited abortion access on women and their mental health. One study found that women who were denied abortions had higher levels of anxiety and stress, as well as lower levels of self-esteem. The women most affected were those who had previous history of mental health conditions, trauma, or abuse. Studies like these shed light on the notable effect of limited abortion on those who were already struggling with their mental health, as well as that of those who were not previously struggling with their mental health. By taking away the ease of access to abortion, many women in the United States have begun to struggle with their mental health even more than they already were, in some cases. This is incredibly significant to the welfare of women in the U.S. If they struggle with mental health, it makes the fetus more likely to have mood disorders and mental health issues. So if women are denied abortion care, then it will have an effect on not only the women themselves, but it will also have an effect on the next generation. Marginalized groups are far more drastically affected by limited access to abortion in the U.S. than those who are not marginalized and live in the same areas, to the point where the need to travel to access abortions and the subsequent delays in care could lead to their medical conditions getting worse. Marginalized groups are particularly affected since patients may not have the transportation or childcare necessary for them to travel. So, if a group is marginalized and they have limited access to abortion, without adequate health care while pregnant, the physical welfare of women is also impacted. If women, who are in a lower demographic, have a lower ability to receive care for any conditions they develop during pregnancy, then they are also at a higher risk for complications during the scope of their pregnancy. The struggle for women who are marginalized to obtain abortions has an even larger impact, forcing women who are poor, and that's 75% of the population and much higher percentage of those women in Mississippi who elect abortions before viability, they are put at a tremendously greater risk of medical complications and ending their life, 14 times greater to give birth to a child full term than it is to have an abortion before viability. Women in marginalized groups are far more likely to face complications that put their lives in jeopardy because the lack of ability for them to receive care for the conditions they develop. This is especially true of those who tend to elect to have an abortion before viability. By forcing women to carry their pregnancies to term, there is an increased chance of women, particularly those who belong to marginalized demographic groups, developing a serious medical condition that threatens their life and could be prevented by giving them an abortion when the possibility of a condition developing is first found. The struggle for these groups to obtain abortions creates a far greater risk than it does for the women who are not part of marginalized demographic groups, thus increasing the danger for them to carry to term, especially if they do not wish to. Not only does limited abortion access affect women, it also affects our society and the child born from a pregnancy where an abortion would have been administered. Additional children born from unwanted pregnancies will likely add more strain to an already overwhelmed foster care system, further compromising child welfare. The child that results from unwanted pregnancies not only places a financial burden on the parents, who may not be in a place to financially support a child, and often lead to the child being surrendered to social services and the foster care system. Adding to their argument, I would say that the foster care system is already well over capacity in some places, and those places tend to align with people who are marginalized and surrender their unwanted pregnancies. If they were allowed to have an abortion, it would decrease the strain on the state. Decentralization of abortion legislation in the U.S. has a greater, generally negative impact on females in the U.S. Though I can see that abortion may not align with everyone's morals, I still insist that abortion laws should be centralized in the federal government with the line of viability as the cutoff and notes that address special cases that warrant exceptions as they appear, thus addressing the special cases that warrant an abortion set after the line of viability. This is because state-by-state legislation has a detrimental effect on the welfare of women. The evidence shows that re-centralizing abortion legislation in the U.S. would improve the welfare of women in the U.S., leading to a mentally and physically healthier female population in the U.S., especially for women in marginalized areas and groups, so that women can more easily access life-saving care that is necessary for them to continue living.